Today we're going to build this poplar table. I made a few mistakes along the way, so if you have any suggestions, just let me know in the comments. I started by planing down the kiln-dried, 2-inch thick, rough-cut slab that I used for the tabletop. All the wood for this project was about $30. Then I began squaring up the sides. Because my fence is really small, I used a straight edge on the side that was most concave. This allowed me to cut a straight edge on the other side. Then I flipped it over and used the new clean edge to cut the concave side. This worked surprisingly well. In order to get the glue up as flush as possible, I cut the slab in half and cleaned up the edges a bit more. Next, I started cutting down the leg pieces. I used the straight edge trick again, and then ripped all the leg pieces off that first clean cut. Instead of using the planer, I just cut off the 2 remaining sides of each piece with the table saw. The legs are made up of only 3 different lengths of wood. I clamped the 4 pieces I need for each of those lengths together, and then I cut them with the miter saw. This helped to ensure that they were exactly the same length. I sanded everything down with a 150 grit sandpaper. The tabletop is made up of 2 pieces. I used my doweling jig to cut the holes for the dowels. This isn't necessary, but it helps to keep everything lined up during the glue up. Once that was done, I glued and clamped everything together. Here's a little foreshadowing of problems to come. The boards appear to be a little bit warped, but I continued anyway because I thought it might not be that bad. After everything dried, I cut the top down to length with a straight edge and my circular saw. Pro tip, make sure your blade depth is deep enough so that you actually cut the wood through. Then I sanded the top and the legs again with 220 grit sandpaper. Now to assemble the legs. I used pocket holes and glue to hold everything together. Pocket holes are really great and allow you to build really fast, and they have a lot of strength. I used this Craig jig, which was about $40. It's really easy to use. You just set the depth, clamp on the jig, and then drill the holes. Then I glued and assembled the 2 long sides of the base. You won't see the pocket holes when they're done because they'll face the top and the ground. For the 4 short pieces connecting the 2 legs, I just glued and clamped them. As it turns out, the top was far too warped to use, so I decided to cut it down into 4 pieces. Then I used this flat MDF board as a base to flatten each piece. I leveled each piece with shims and then hot glued them down to the board. This lets me run them through the planer and just take off the high areas on the top. Once I have a flat surface on one side, I can flip it over and level out the other side. This works surprisingly well. I also had to recut the sides of the 4 boards to square them back up. For the glue up this time around, I used a biscuit joiner that I had purchased recently. This is definitely not necessary, as I showed before, but is really convenient, and it actually only costs about $70. It just cuts these little slots in where you can place biscuits that expand once it's glued. They do a good job of keeping everything aligned. After it dried, I cut down the ends again and sanded off the excess glue. I bought some little 14 gauge tabletop fasteners to attach the top to the base. They should allow for natural wood movement and were only $8 for about 20 of them. I used the biscuit joiner to cut out the slots for the fasteners, but you could also just cut in these slots using the table saw before the glue up. I will link it to another video where I use a different method to attach the top without the need for extra hardware. Luckily, all that extra work solved the warping issue. I decided not to use stain, but I applied 3 coats of water-based polyurethane with my finish sprayer. And that was it. I'm really happy how this turned out considering the issues we were having with the wood warp. I'm definitely learning a lot on the fly, so please drop me any suggestions you have in the comments below. If I had to pick something to change, I'd probably stain it next time, but I'm still not quite sure. Also, don't forget to hit the thumbs up button, subscribe, and turn on notifications. If you want to, follow me on Instagram at NathanBuilds for behind the scenes updates. Finally, thank you again so much for watching and all your support. I can't believe we're past 1,000 subscribers. I say that every time, but it's still getting to me. Alright, anyway, I'll see you in the next episode.